Question 1. Filled with deep despair, Miss Meadows went down the cold corridors to the music hall because. You need to write just a single reason in your own words, highlighting, incorporating all the key elements in it. So what is my reason here? Filled with deep despair, Miss Meadows went down the cold corridors to the music hall because she was going to take her first singing class of the day. She was a music teacher at an all-girls school, and here she was going to take her first singing class of the day. Next, question number 2. The science mistress stopped Miss Meadows because. The former, that is the science mistress, noticed that the latter, that is Miss Meadows, looked cold and thus wished her in sweet, pretentious way, commenting on the cold weather. She was there to strike a conversation, but Miss Meadows was not willing to speak to her. Let's see why. The next question. Miss Meadows stared in hatred at the science mistress when she was stopped by the latter because. What is the reason? Because she thought that the kindness of the science mistress was insincere, number 1, and perhaps she noticed her despair, number 2. And was cruelly commenting on it, number 3. So you need to highlight these 3 aspects in your single reason. Frame the reason in such a way that you include all the keywords and expressions. Let us now see which are the important words and expressions here. Miss Meadows thought that the kindness of the science mistress was, number 1, insincere. Number 2, perhaps she noticed her despair and she was trying to hide her despair and was cruelly commenting on it. So this is number 3. If these 3 points are there in your answer, then I'm sure that you will get full marks. Question 4. Writing reasons is an art, so practice, read as much as possible and follow our reference material. Do check the pinned comment section because we have plenty of important videos for you over there. Check the link and watch our videos. Question 4 very quickly. Miss Meadows gave the science mistress in exchange for her smile a quick grimace and passed on. She did not speak much. She just passed on because. Filled with sorrow. Now this is important. Miss Meadows was filled with sorrow. Despair is an important theme of this short story, the singing lesson. Filled with sorrow, that morning she was in no mood to speak to her and tried to hide the truth about her feelings from the science mistress. Here the important aspects are, number 1, filled with despair. Number 2, in no mood to speak to her, and number 3, she tried to hide her feelings about the science mistress. You can also write that she also felt that the science mistress was mocking her. Was she mocking her? So this point can also be highlighted in your reason. Miss Meadows strode down the center aisle, mounted the steps, turned sharply, seized the brass music stand, planted it in front of her and gave 2 sharp taps with her baton because. I have taken this from the text, so read the text, you will get the answers. Because forms 4, 5 and 6 were assembled in the music hall making a deafening noise, and she, filled with cold despair, wanted to maintain silence in the class, or she, filled with deep despair, you may also write, demanded silence. Both are same. She wanted to maintain silence or she demanded silence in the class. The most important point here is silence. It's there in the book. She wanted everyone to be silent so that she could begin her class. And she was already filled with deep despair. That is why she was in no mood to scold the girls or be concerned about anything else. She just wanted silence. 6. Miss Meadows did not directly look at the students and treated them coldly, without bothering about their opinions about her that morning because, again, the same thing again and again, she was filled with a deep-rooted, sharp despair, bleeding to death. Words taken from the text. Bleeding to death, pierced to the heart. Again, taken from the text after receiving Basil's letter informing her of his decision to end their engagement. This is the first reason. Basil had broken off their engagement, and therefore Miss Meadows was defiant in the face of her students' judgment. She did not bother about their judgment. She was trying to hide her feelings from them without bothering much. The next one now, question 7. Miss Meadows was bleeding to death, pierced to the heart by a letter that her fiancé Basil left because. What is the specific reason? Basil suddenly ended their relationship, their engagement. This is important, abrupt, sudden ending of her engagement, and perhaps was insensitive, cruel, and careless to write that although he loved her, the notion of marriage made him feel regret, lightly crossing out disgust. This is the content of the letter that Basil sent to break off their engagement. You need to explain that as briefly as possible here in this reason. Instead of greeting Mary and accepting the yellow chrysanthemum, Miss Meadows ignores Mary and speaks to the students coldly. She is cold and indifferent. She is rude because Basil's cruel breakup letter prompts her to be cold and cruel to Mary in turn, and she is lost in thought, filled with despair. She is not concerned about anyone now. She is filled with deep despair. And Basil's cruel breakup makes her cold and cruel to others, here especially to Mary. And she is lost in her own thought. She is lost in her own world now. This short story highlights the interiority of Miss Meadows. This is very, very important. Learn this. The interiority, that is the complex psychology of Miss Meadows at a time when she is facing a personal crisis. So you need to focus on the interiority of this character. Question 9. Mary Beasley greets Miss Meadows and offers her a yellow chrysanthemum because she has done this ritual. This is a ritual. Mention this word ritual. Of the flower every day for a term and a half and is as much part of the lesson as opening the piano. This is customary. This has to be done. Mary Beasley greeting Miss Meadows and Mary Beasley also offering her a yellow chrysanthemum. And the yellow chrysanthemum symbolizes hope, love, happiness. But now Miss Meadows has no hope. She is hopeless. She is unhappy, filled with cold despair. And therefore the rejection. 10. For the first time, Mary was filled with horror after she greeted Miss Meadows and offered her a yellow chrysanthemum because Miss Meadows totally ignored the flower. Again, taken from the text. Totally ignored. Use words from the text. Totally ignored the flower. Next, made no reply. Number 2, to her greeting and instead coldly said to open the book at page 14. This is the third point. So, number 1, totally ignored the flower. Number 2, made no reply to her greeting. And number 3, coldly said to open the book at page 14 instead of page number 32. Next, Mary blushed until the tears stood in her eyes because Miss Meadows rather unkindly, highlight this, Miss Meadows rather unkindly refused to speak to her or accept the gift of the yellow chrysanthemum, and also unfeelingly instructed the students to begin singing a lament without any expression. Hence, this was a staggering moment and she was almost crying. The song Miss Meadows has chosen is called a lament because the songs are important. Learn answers about the significance of the songs. The song Miss Meadows has chosen is called a lament because she is heartbroken. This is the first reason. She is heartbroken as Basil has broken off their engagement, and Miss Meadows' feelings about the autumn and her own dwindling prospects in life are closely connected with this song. From the name, evoking sadness and aging. She is already 30. And what will she do now? Will she meet anyone else? And will she get married ever? This is the question that is bothering Miss Meadows. This is going to be a social embarrassment for her. Question 13. The students begin to sing a lament with mournful voices. Why are they mournful? In the beginning, they were filled with gleeful excitement, and now they are singing with mournful voices because this song, name the song, a lament, transmits Miss Meadows' cold despair to the girls. Very, very important. Transmits Miss Meadows' despair to the girls. Miss Meadows is sad. The song is a sad one, and the girls also become sad. And their gleeful excitement has vanished. This reason is very important. Go through it properly. In fact, all these reasons are important for your exam preparation. Try to learn them. Question 14. According to Miss Meadows, nothing could be more tragic than the lyrics of a lament because she feels that the words themselves, even sung without emotion, sound like a sigh, a sob, a groan of awful mournfulness. And the crying is directly connected to Basil's letter. She has read the letter and she is remembering the words of the letter while she is singing. She is making the students sing the song a lament. Both are connected because this short story highlights the interiority, the complex nuances of Miss Meadows' psychology, emotional turmoil when she is faced with a personal crisis. She is already 30. How will the society react if she remains a spinster? Next, according to Miss Meadows, Basil's letter came out of nothing and she wondered what reason could have led up to it because his last letter, highlight this letter and the previous letter, because his last letter had been very hopeful, in which he mentioned the fumed oak bookcase he had bought for their books and a hat stand he had seen and planned to buy. And now all of a sudden he was writing to her announcing that the engagement was over. Very strange indeed. And therefore Miss Meadows was filled with deep despair. The next one. The girls were supposed to take up the song on page 32, but Miss Meadows picks up the song on page 14 because it is a general lament. The song is a general lament on the fast fading pleasures of spring to autumn and then to winter. And as the song progresses, the words take on a personal relevance and the lament becomes an expression of her own suffering. Significance of the song. Learn the significance of the two songs. 17 now. The fading roses of pleasure is a symbolic expression of Miss Meadows' personal loss and suffering because the roses of pleasure awaken memories of Basil's last visit when he was dressed in a bright blue suit with a dark red rose in his buttonhole, looking very handsome. And he was also smiling, and he was also stroking his hair and then his moustache. His teeth gleamed when he smiled, and that is exactly what I have mentioned here. I have taken everything from the text. So read the text thoroughly. The headmaster's wife kept on asking Basil to dinner, but he could not refuse because of his vanity. Basil as a character was vain. He was insensitive. He was rude. He did not care about the feelings of Miss Meadows because of his vanity, and he did not want to be unpopular, as it would do him harm in society, in climbing up the social ladder, in doing good in his career. The next one, the young girls began to feel positively frightened because Miss Meadows spoke to them in a very strange, stony tone. You need to write these words. Strange, stony tone. A simple, very, very brief reason. So the length of the reason is not an issue. The questions available are very significant. Read the sentences and try to understand the question, and then frame your reasons accordingly. I've just turned the page, and now question 20. Mary Beasley on the music stool wriggled her spine because when Miss Meadows described how to fill the words of a lament with emotion, the awful tone of her voice frightened Mary. Here I'll do a little bit of correction. The awful tone of her voice frightened Mary. Awful. This word must be there. The awfulness. Highlight words like this. Highlight textual references like this. The engagement had seemed like a miracle to Miss Meadows and also to the science mistress because, again, a simple reason. Basil was 25 and she was 30. Everyone was surprised. Next, the older girls were crimson and some of the younger ones began to cry because Miss Meadows asked them to repeat the song, oh my God, again, and put in as much expression as they could, and the girls were extremely upset by the emotion in it. So I'll just add a word. The girls were extremely upset by the emotion in it. If the question is in the past tense, the answer must also be in the past tense. So do not mix the tenses. Be very careful while writing your reasons. Miss Meadows thinks that it does not matter to her how little Basil loves her because she knows he does not love her. This is not going to be a love marriage. This is going to be a marriage based on convenience. She's already 30. She needs to get married as soon as possible. She knows he does not love her at all, and this shows that their marriage would be one of convenience. Again, very important. Marriage would be one of convenience for her, just as it would be for Basil. He also perhaps doesn't love her. This is not true love. This is not unconditional love. This is a love. This is a marriage based on convenience. The next one now, 24. Miss Meadows would have to disappear somewhere and would have to leave the school because, again, a very important question. You need to learn this for your exam. Miss Meadows would have to disappear somewhere and would have to leave school because she was a self-conscious character. Character sketch of Miss Meadows. She was a self-conscious character, seemed to worry about her public image and could never face the science mistress or the girls after the news of broken engagement got known. Next, Miss Meadows asks her students to talk quietly until she returns because a student, Monica, comes into the classroom and tells Miss Meadows that the headmistress, Miss Watt, wants to see her. She has to go to the headmistress' office. Therefore, she allows the girls to talk quietly, but they are unable to do so. Why? Let's see. Although Miss Meadows allowed her students to talk quietly, they were not happy because they were not talking because Miss Meadows' despair had such an extreme effect, an extreme impact on her students that they were crying. Most of them were blowing their noses and they were too subdued. This is important. Too subdued to do anything else. This is how I have made use of the textual references in order to frame a compact, crisp reason. Miss Watt kindly asked Miss Meadows to sit down. Kindly. Because she wanted to give her a telegram that had come for her, showing her worry. She was concerned about the well-being of Miss Meadows. Miss Meadows could not take her eyes off the short telegram written by Basil because here he said that she must ignore his earlier letter and that he must have been mad. She was too happy to express her feelings and therefore she could not take off her eyes from the short telegram. Miss Watt reminds Miss Meadows that she still has 15 minutes left to teach in her class because her kindness drops away as soon as it is clear that Miss Meadows has not had bad news. A strict disciplinarian. The kindness is replaced by strict instructions, strict discipline. And therefore she reminds Miss Meadows that she has to go to her class. She's annoyed. Before Miss Meadows leaves, Miss Watt scolds her because she does not approve of her teachers receiving telegrams containing good news during the school hours and will allow telegrams at work only for bad news. Therefore, Miss Meadows is scolded. Miss Meadows assigns the girls a different song now on page 32 when she returns to the music classroom because she is overjoyed now. She was filled with deep despair, but now she is overjoyed and is on the wings of love, of hope and joy after reading Basil's short letter where he asks her to ignore his earlier letter and calls himself mad for breaking off their engagement. Miss Meadows picked up the yellow chrysanthemum and held it to her lips because she was so overjoyed that she was smiling and she wanted to hide her smile. Mention this, hide her smile. 33. The girls begin to sing the happy song Miss Meadows has assigned, but she stops them because she finds the singing awful and dreadful. Awful, very important, dreadful, and says that they must sound more warm, joyful and eager. Well, I end this session here and do subscribe to our channel for more brand new videos.